One of my most important observations on my path to awakening was regarding language and how it is used and manipulated to gain power and control over you, specifically within the law and legal system, but also in a wider society too. This very idea was detailed by George Orwell in his novel 1984. His depiction of a futuristic society included the idea of newspeak and the limiting of language of the lower levels of a society for the purpose of controlling a populace. When we look very closely, we can see examples of manipulation at work, especially in the law and legal systems. A simple example would be that we are now referred to as male and female, a biological classification of the sexes, much like animals are categorized and sexed for use as commodities, rather than as men and women, human beings, with individual rights and a potential for higher consciousness. For the purpose of this presentation, I feel it is necessary to clarify my own use of terms of language at this point. This is because I have noticed that within different disciplines and common usage of language and perspectives, there are differing uses of expressions relating to newly developing concepts on complex subjects such as the human consciousness. I'll let you browse through these at your own leisure. Here are some further terms which you may not be familiar with. These may be used later in this presentation, otherwise they are provided merely for your interest. As such, it is not intended to undermine anyone else's perspective. It is my sole or sole intention to communicate effectively. Okay, let's get back to the manipulation of language for the purpose of control. Legalese and the legal system is a highly manipulative tool which has been used to deceive everyone within the lower levels of society who conform to or accept the system at face value. The root of the linguistic deception comes from the old Babylonian Phoenician culture where the phonetic sounding system originated. Within our court system, a hearing is conducted, meaning one is heard, as opposed to seeing or reading the words one has written. This gives much scope for words and meaning to be misrepresented and the intentions of the speaker to be distorted from the original intent of the speaker by the receiver or the hearing. If you have not yet seen my previous presentation, I would suggest you take a look for more information on the legal manipulation. It is a web with many spokes and it took some considerable unpicking. Note, see Kate of Gaia for a hard-hitting look at the full extent of how meaning and language can be distorted or manipulated in this way. As I commented earlier, our power is given away by our consent or by tacit agreement. There are devices used by the law system which cleverly manufacture your consent. By accepting these devices such as the corporate identity through the legal name status and by allowing yourself to be a dead corporate entity or a legal title through licensing and other state-issued documentation, you, in your unawareness, agree to being used and abused by this system which seeks ultimate domination and control of your mind, body and soul. If it hasn't yet become apparent in your daily life just how much the so-called authorities are interfering and affecting your everyday life in a negative way, then my guess would be that you are either heavily dependent on the system for your sustenance, or you have been so run ragged trying to keep up with maintaining your livelihood. Meanwhile, the goalposts are getting further away and smaller by the week with increasingly unobtainable and unsustainable efforts, that you could not possibly have had the time to pop your head up to notice such a small detail. The Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Right are the documents which form our British Constitution. If you hear people say that we do not have a constitution, it is a misdirection. Their intention is to remove the broad application of the Constitution, which has stood for 800 years and is a testament to its validity, strength and longevity, in favour of drafting a codified constitution, such as the American Constitution, which is limited and explicitly worded. This is a deception and would open up the possibility of limiting our freedoms by popular consent. Our freedoms have long been fought over and won time and time again throughout history. It has been a long battle over the temporal and spiritual aspects of our humanity. Our constitutional history has become perverted and distorted in modern times, and I would encourage you to at least familiarise yourself with the Constitution as best as you can, to have a foundation for your wider research and a firm basis for being able to stand on your own authority in spite of the Constitution being potentially weakened. If you know what tools you have available, you can apply the best tool for the situation you wish to create. See the British Constitution group for more detail. In my experience of dealing with authorities when employing the Constitution as an argument or a lawful case, all it really did was tie you into a corrupt system structure, and therefore they were still able to just act on you in any way they wanted to, because you're consenting for the system. Legislation does not define your rights. None of the documents exist to prescribe your rights to you. You already have inalienable rights. This means that they are inherent in your very being as a human being, and they cannot be taken away. They can only be given away. You are free to do as you will. The reason these constitutional documents and legislation exist is because there has always been a struggle for power and domination over the human race by a select few. The documents were created to protect your rights, to ensure that anyone who was given power of any kind was moderated and subject to the rules of office by taking oaths and promising to keep their word, acting responsibly and on behalf of the people or anyone consenting to it. Legislation is the rule of law, applicable to all those enacting official public duties on behalf of the people. Legislation, or the Constitution, is an official recognition of the inalienable rights of individuals. It is not to tell you what you can and can't do. It is intended to inform them of what they can and can't do, under their titles of office whilst carrying out their public duties. However, all systems have been subject to infiltration and the usurpation of power, rightful law and office, and such things as the Constitution or Parliament are primarily now a token gesture or simply a puppet show to keep you distracted from the actual control mechanisms. If you do not claim your rights, you are taken to be in tacit agreement with the now de facto illegitimate system, which carries on regardless. Whilst everyone continues to accept the system, it claims legitimacy on that basis. Whether conscious of it or not, your actions speak louder than words, in this case. From a lawful, contractual perspective, actions can be seen to indicate consent and agreement. The real meaning of our constitutional documents has stood this far, but are not infallible. Part of the constitutional agreement and responsibility of the populace was that the people must keep the authorities in check, holding them to account for their actions. Anyone who values their freedom must not become complacent. You must be prepared to stand up for your rights. The struggle for our freedom from oppression and control has spanned millennia.